Our phones are almost dead. Our patience is wearing thin. And the Washington Commanders still don't have a head coach. Anthony, I did not think this is the show we were going to do today, sir.
Yeah, I think we were under the impression that hopefully yesterday we would have a head coach, but if not yesterday, at least today by the time we got on air. And the only news we got is we're the only team left still searching for a head coach.
Still searching. Mike Macdonald headed to Seattle, certainly the guy that I was really high on after Ben Johnson decided that he didn't want to go to Washington or Seattle. He wanted to stay in Detroit. And it's it feels bad. It feels bad. But let me posit this to you, Anthony, to you, the audience. Anthony, you have a microphone in front of you, so you'll be able to respond expeditiously. If you're out there listening, you have a phone, presumably, and you can call me and tell me that I'm wrong at 301-230-0980, or say thank you for talking you off the ledge. If Washington hires Dan Quinn or Anthony Weaver, we should evaluate that decision as is. In other words, we should evaluate it as if they hired them first. That if after the season they went through their process and they were outside of the Patriots, who had apparently done their process before last season and put something in Gerard Mayo's contract, if they had 2 weeks ago hired Dan Quinn, hire Adam Peters immediately, do the interviews, Quinn gets knocked out of the playoffs, they go interview, they're like, this dude's awesome, and they hire Dan Quinn. They still would have hired Dan Quinn. Whether they hired Dan Quinn today, tomorrow, or 2 weeks ago, they still hired the same guy. And I think that needs to be the perspective here. This process feels bad because it doesn't feel like Washington is in control. And I think that reality is just kind of how pro sports goes sometimes. Like, there is just the nature that these are grown folks making adult decisions about their lives, and not everything's going to go with the timeline of fans and of our rooting interests, whether that is the fans like who are on the side of the team or the media wanting to have resolution. But at the end of the day, we went into this hiring cycle. I don't say we, because everyone had their lists, and some people hated Dan Quinn and the thought of Dan Quinn before the season ended, nevertheless what happened in that playoff game. But Dan Quinn, I think, like universal rankings, was seen as one of the top 3 candidates for sure in this cycle. Well, the top candidate, Ben Johnson, the universal top candidate, took himself out. He was not an option for anyone. Raheem Morris, I think, was considered right there. Atlanta got him. Good job, Atlanta. They decided to not wait for the potential home run in Johnson or Macdonald, and they were super thorough. They interviewed 15 people and were like, you know what? We know Raheem. He was our interim. He was here under Dan Quinn. We know him. We like him. He's our guy. We're bringing Raheem in. Sucks for Washington, but they decided to wait. And if they wind up with DQ, with Dan Quinn, and he was seen going into the process as the third best guy or a top 3 guy in some order, people should still be psyched about that. That's good, even if the process feels bad. It'd be like, if, I don't know, something, I needed to think of a better analogy before trying to make an analogy, but like something good happened to you and the way it happened wasn't the way you thought. You win the lottery, but you're stressed because you lost the ticket for a second. I don't know, something like that. You misread the ticket. Point is, who they hire is the most important thing. This is all theater right now. None of this matters as long as they hire the right person. And frankly, we're not going to know this for 3 years, 5 years. And that is the way the NFL goes. But to hear the Rivera 2.0 stuff when he just as easily could be Pete Carroll 2.0, to hear some of the criticisms of Dan Quinn when people, I think, are just lashing out because they wanted Johnson or Macdonald, or they wanted someone young, and this isn't the optimal. And I'm not saying it's optimal. I like the other candidates better too. But don't take that out on Dan Quinn before he's hired, and then don't take it out on Dan Quinn when he's hired. Judge him for what he is, not how he got here. That would be my spiel, Anthony.
Yeah, I mean, my only pushback would be, just like Atlanta, they chose not to wait. They chose not to go for the home run hitter. At what point, though, do you not try to get, the best guy that is out there? We already know the Ravens and the Lions, they were, I guess, building something in terms of, getting to the title games and ultimately not just making the playoffs. But we had to wait with their candidates and things of that nature. So, how long do you think we should have even waited when you have a Raheem out there, when you have, other good candidates out there? Because at the same token, had Johnson not taken his name out and we got him, I think no one will be upset.
In some ways, it's like Dan Campbell going for it on fourth down. You don't know the result ahead of time.
Yep.
And by the way, that is not just, hey, like people who criticize Campbell are like, they don't really seem to factor in the possibility that you go for it on fourth down and you could have kicked a field goal and missed the field goal. Like, that's a part of it. So you go for what seems like the aggressive option. It doesn't work out. Well, you could have gone for the conservative option, and, they don't interview as many people, and Raheem's their guy, and Raheem's like, I know Atlanta. I want to go back to Atlanta. I don't have good memories in Washington. Whatever the reason, right? And this also presumes that the guys left aren't their top candidates. We don't know that. Like, could they have been more, like, there is definitely a part of me that says Adam Peters and Josh Harris, like when Josh Harris wants someone, Josh Harris tends to go get that person. And so if all of a sudden he thought Mike Macdonald was the dude, I don't know that Mike Macdonald gets on that plane to Seattle. Maybe Macdonald likes Seattle better because he's a defense guy and he likes their defensive personnel better than here. And he's thinking short term, not long term. He doesn't care as much about the number 2 pick. He cares about having Devin Witherspoon. And if that's the case, he made the right choice for him. Good for him. But I think Anthony Weaver is a fascinating candidate. I was reading up on him a little bit more before the show. I like Anthony Weaver a lot. I like Dan Quinn a lot. I like Aaron Glenn less, but I don't dislike Aaron Glenn. And so that was true yesterday. That was true 3 weeks ago. It's true today. It just feels worse when you don't have the power. And Washington, because of how this has gone down, like they have the power over these candidates, but it feels like the people picked other stuff. And so you feel the pain of rejection when realistically maybe DQ was the guy the whole time and Washington just had to kind of play out the process. Maybe Mike Macdonald got on that plane because Dan Quinn and the Commanders have been in contract negotiations for 24 hours. We don't know. That's the other thing about this. We just don't know because this organization now doesn't leak anything, which is kind of cool, but also kind of terrible as a member of the media. I would like to know stuff. 301-230-0980. Phone calls coming. We'll learn a little bit more about Dan Quinn and what he was like as a head coach in Atlanta coming up at 5 o'clock for Not My Beat. D. Orlando Ledbetter, who's covered the Falcons forever for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, will be our guest. So excited for that. Right now, though, taking your calls, 301-230-0980. And let's go to DH, who was so good yesterday with us. DH, get us started today, man. How are you?
Hey, man, I'm going to try to see if I can follow up from yesterday, man, but I'm doing great. How are you, man?
I'm good, bro. I'm good.
Hey, so this coaching search has kind of brought me to this kind of analogy. It's like going to the grocery store hungry with a lot of options, and because you don't know what you want, you start picking it and looking at different things. But then what happens is quickly it turns from a grocery store to a fruit stand, and you have limited options left. But I think now the way the Commanders are going to try to play this is that, you know what, I like apples anyway. So I didn't need all those options. I needed just this one singular thing. I think what they're doing right now is playing the field, man. It's a new regime. It's a different era. You know, maybe they didn't have an idea of who they wanted, but you got to run the process. You got to run the gamut. You know, if these teams are playing this late into the season, they have some good coaches. So you want to interview those guys. Maybe they don't want to commit 6 years to Mike McDaniel, to Mike Macdonald. Maybe they don't want somebody who's already been a head coach. Maybe they do want somebody who's been a head coach. Maybe they want a different scheme. Maybe they want this. Maybe they want that. But the thing about it is, just like you said before the break, us fans don't have an idea. Okay, this new regime has brought all the Flex Seal and has covered up all the leaks previously from the last regime, and there's nothing getting out. We don't know. So the same way, like I said yesterday, man, and this is true. We have to trust the process, because let me tell you what, when Josh Harris gets up later this week and announces their coach, they're gonna make you believe like this is the guy from day one, and you're not gonna think that it was a last minute. Oh, we got to make sure we get this guy because we don't have anybody. No, they're gonna make you believe that this is the guy from day one, and just like you said, we have to give it some time. So regardless of who it is, whether they let you and me coach, you know, they got to give us time to give us to allow the team to rebuild and to get our steam in there and just let it roll how they're gonna do it. But hey, man, we gotta trust the process at this point, because at this point, that's all we got left to do, man.
Right. No, I appreciate it. And DH, if they want to pay us to coach, I don't know what job you have and what you make, but that would be a raise for me. So I am available
immediately.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm always available. They got my number.
Okay. Excellent.
And whatever scheme you want to run, we can do it, man.
All right, we'll put our heads together.
Whatever you want to run, I'll adjust.
All right, bro. I appreciate it. Thanks for the call. Look, I mean, the process. I will say that it's not just fans don't know anything. We don't know anything either. Like, I'm sure John Keim knows a little bit, but, I mean, John's a reporter. He reports what he knows, and it ain't a lot right now. And he's the first one to tell you, like, yeah, I don't know. But the little bit I have heard is Dan Quinn is someone who really impressed them in their interview. So they had to, like, Quinn was available pretty quickly. They had to let the other guys finish out their seasons / get to the days allotted by the NFL that they're allowed to interview people based off of where when their season finishes, and they had to run out the ground ball. They might have come out of the Dan Quinn interview being like, "Hey, if we wind up hiring him, like, we're set, we're good. But let's talk to these other guys." And now, all the other guys aren't options, and are like, "Sick, our decision got made for us." Like, we don't know, and I'm sure eventually people will fill in some of the gaps and whatever. But, you know, if as DH said, you go to the grocery store going hunting for an apple, and all of a sudden you make a wrong turn and you wind up at a fruit stand and you buy some apples, like, you still wound up with an apple. So that's good. Also, that was a very apt analogy. I am, like, ravenously hungry today. I just ate lunch an hour ago, had a protein bar. I'm still starving today. So this could be an interesting show. Anthony, you know how it is. When your boy gets hungry, things can go sideways.
They can indeed, but we'll make sure they don't.
Yeah, no, I'm going to hydrate. I got some other snacks. We'll make it all work. All right, let's go back to the phones. Let's go to Kenny in Charlotte. Kenny, listening on the Odyssey app or watching on YouTube?
Listening on the app.
Oh, appreciate that, man. Thank you.
Hey, listen, y'all. First of all, Anthony, that was a cold beat you was playing, man. I thought you was going to start spitting. I loved it.
Anthony currently has his mouth full. After I just said I'm hungry, Anthony currently has his mouth full of food, just rubbing it in over there, so he is unable to talk. Don't you dare. If you crack that mic with your mouth full right now, Haney, I am not only going to fine you the 5 points to put our lunch on that board right now, I'm going to fine you another 100 points, so you have to buy 2 lunches.
All right, I'm done.
All right, you're done chewing. All right, anyway, Kenny, hit us with where you're at on where we're at with the coaching search.
Oh my gosh! Like I was telling Anthony earlier, I think I'm dealing with fear versus facts, right? So, and I think I'm super influenced by fear because I've seen this team. I was raised when they were the Redskins. I'm talking about 82, 87, 91, 99. You know, I've seen it all, and I really feel like when we found out what happened yesterday with Ben Johnson, and then today what's happening with Mike Macdonald, I immediately just thought sabotage. Is this the ghost of Dan Snyder? Or is this some league NFL sabotage or some acts that they still have to grind with us? Like, since when does everybody want to be loyal to their team now when they have great opportunities, considering all of the perks that you get coming into this franchise with the cap space, with the number 2 pick? That's the fear part of it, right? But the facts is that I can't be afraid of a so-called retread in Dan Quinn when you got people like Tony Dungy, retread, Super Bowl.
Yeah.
You got Pete Carroll, retread, Super Bowl. Bill Parcells, Bill Belichick, Andy Reid. The list goes on and on. These so-called retreads did it right the second time and won Super Bowl. So y'all tell me, should I lean to more towards field facts? Appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the call, Kenny. I'm always going to say facts. Like, operating from a place of fear is how you get in trouble, because it clouds you and tends to push you towards, and I don't mean this in a political sense, I mean this in a more general sense. It tends to push you in a more conservative, straightforward line of thinking, right? So it's like, if we just have the simple solution, even though that solution's been tried 1,000 times and hasn't worked, but it sounds good, so you go for it instead of thinking with clarity and being innovative and being like, no. And sometimes being innovative is doing something that feels obvious or it doesn't feel innovative. Like, everyone right now is searching for the young hotshot coach, so maybe the actual innovative thing is to go with the retread. I'm not always like, hey, zig when everyone else zags, because sometimes there's a reason everyone is zigging or zagging, whichever one I needed to make that analogy work. But I do think that there is a huge proverbial profit to be made by looking at where markets are inefficient as a general principle, whatever the market is, a coaching market, a schematic market, whatever. Like, doing the things that everyone else is not is a good way to operate often, because that means you can have a weakness. I mean, if everyone is trying to find the hot young coach, and there's quality, quote-unquote, retreads on the market, the chance that you get the best retread is going to be a lot higher than you actually nail the hot young coach hire. You might wind up instead with Adam Gase, not Kyle Shanahan. And so if you go with someone who's a retread, you wind up with Pete Carroll or Bill Belichick or Andy Reid or Tony Dungy, guys who have proven they can coach in this league, who had mistakes in their first stops but learned from them and came back better the second time around. Well, everyone else is searching in the pool of candidates that has never done it before, and they might get it right. They might get Sean, they might get Kevin, they might get Kyle, but they might get Adam Gase. They might get Matt Rule coming from the college ranks. They might get, pick any other guy who's been the hotshot young coach and failed. There's examples of it all. So it's not a clean and clear argument. We got a couple more calls. We got some lines open to 301-230-0980. Let's take a few more calls, and then depending on how that goes, we also could hear from Logan, take command on some of the prospects he's watching the Senior Bowl. We got D. Orlando Ledbetter coming up at the top of the hour. My girl Stacey Roast is scheduled to join us coming up at 6 o'clock. From Seattle, talking about Mike Macdonald going there and kind of how they saw this whole search playing out from their side of it as one of the final 2 jobs remaining. So plenty to still come here on the Hoffman Show. And, of course, if news breaks of a Commander's hire, you will hear it here first. Let's start off with Robert in Annapolis this segment, talking about the Commanders' ongoing, yes, still somehow ongoing, coaching search. Robert, thanks for calling. Thanks for holding through the break. You are on the Hoffman Show.
All right. Good afternoon. Thanks for taking my call. Craig, I think serendipity was the word you were looking for, which is an unforeseen benefit coming out of what seems like an unfortunate circumstance.
That is definitely a good word. Also, I have many troubles searching for words at times. I had a whole advocating absconding snafu last week, which was very fun. But serendipity, everybody, we'll take it.
It's like falling through a manhole and landing on a big pile of money. You know
yeah, there we go. The old Scrooge McDuck theory.
As a Ravens fan, I have some familiarity with Anthony Weaver, and I can't say that I would say that he would certainly be someone that would warrant in-depth consideration. He's a former player. You may know much about him, but he's been a former player. He's been with a winning organization. I think he's primarily a defensive guy. He was a defensive end. He was a defensive line coach. But I think he's coached some offense, too. And though he hasn't been a head coach, he's been an associate head coach, so he would have, I presume, performed some of the duties involved with that. And his first name is Anthony. I mean, there's a lot of things there that
Haney, your thoughts on this proposition? Is Weaver now your favorite?
I love it because his name is Anthony. I don't know. Yeah.
There we go.
We'll go with that.
Goes by Anthony.
We'll go with it.
There we go. Robert, thank you for the call.
Keep in mind this. It's not merely the head coach. It's the entire staff that makes the team successful. And your team is the Commanders are going into this world of unknown for the next year or two regarding the coach, the players they're going to bring in, and it could be involved the coach as well. So it'll be an interesting adventure. Okay, good luck to you.
Thank you, Robert. I think that last point is very, very good. I think the Anthony point is also great, quite obviously. I mean, we're big fans of Anthony's around here. But this is the blankest slate in the NFL. And I think that's why the job was so appealing to Adam Peters, and it's why we thought it would be super appealing to everybody else as well on the coaching market. It obviously has not necessarily turned out quite that way in terms of first job off the board, easy, clean coaching process. But this is an extremely blank slate. And I do think there is something, to for those that don't know, Anthony Weaver is a former player. He was a defensive lineman. He has 15 and a half career sacks with Baltimore and Houston back in the day. He got his coaching career started at Florida under Urban Meyer for a year, then went into the NFL, ultimately under Rex Ryan in New York, then followed Rex, I believe, to Buffalo. He worked with J.J. Watt and company in Houston for a couple years, and then has been with Baltimore now for a good little bit. So he's been around a bunch of good players, good organizations. He's been essential to the development of the defensive line guys there. But I think that, when we talk about like Macdonald or Johnson or Slowick, like having that schematic advantage in the way that a lot of other hotshot young coaches have, I think there's another thing. Like, I've been thinking about this more, obviously, the last week, and someone brought up a really good point on Twitter the other day because that conversation was happening. Someone countered with Dan Campbell and said, well, what's his schematic advantage? And Campbell has been the best game manager. I know this is hard for some people to believe, but because of his aggressiveness on fourth down, which isn't actually aggressiveness, it's just following the data, Campbell has, on average, been the best game management coach in the league. The data suggests that he has won more games for his team with his clock management, his timeout management, his going for it, like coaching decisions. All of those are put into a metric, and he has the best single ranking of any coach the last 2 years in that metric. And so if you have someone who is a great leader, which you're going to need from anyone, is a great culture setter, has a clear vision for the team, and can be elite on game day in one capacity, whether that is schematically, play calling, or clock game management, that guy's worth it. And maybe Anthony Weaver's that guy. Like, I am very intrigued by him. And I don't know who he would bring, who his staff would be, but he's definitely got connections. He's worked with a bunch of different people, and he's been around the league long enough that I feel like he could probably build a pretty good staff, and especially in conjunction with Adam Peters, who can be very helpful from his time with multiple staffs and multiple organizations that have spread out over the league, and he's got great connections. Let's go to Iman in Durham, checking us out either on YouTube or on the Odyssey app. Iman, thanks for calling. You're on the Hoffman Show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, you got it.
On the YouTube app. Good. So I have been a Washington fan since I was born, which was only 25 years ago. So I've literally never seen them be good. But I grew up like 15, 20 minutes outside of Baltimore. And so I was the only Commanders, or at the time Redskins, fan in the school while, they won the Super Bowl. So I'm honestly just at a point where I'm like, it is what it is. Like, we don't know what we don't know, right? Like, and this is something I appreciate about the analysis that you do and like that you and Logan do is like, we don't know, like right now every Commanders fan is like, forget it, we don't have Ben Johnson. Like it's basically feeling like we have the last pick, right? Like we got stuck with the last pick in PE class or whatever, but like we don't know what's going on behind the scenes, and that's something that this new regime is doing a really good job of, is actually like keeping things under wraps. So like you said, what if they went in and hired or talked to Dan Quinn and they were like, we're going to hire him probably. Let's give everyone their due diligence and go talk to everyone, but he's great. We like the way he would change the culture here, whatever it is. Like, we can't make all these assumptions when we don't know what actually went down. So I feel like the option is just to be optimistic. I mean, at this point, in my mind, anything is better than Ron Rivera. I mean, I respect the hell out of the guy, but like, look at what happened, right? And like you said, we have the number 2 overall pick. Like, there's a lot to be optimistic about. I don't think we should get so hung up on, well, we don't have Ben Johnson, who, like you said, could be Kyle Shanahan, could be freaking, who's that offensive guy that just did not do well? Kellen Moore. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's a crapshoot at this point.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's
so
all
I
about.
don't think there's any point in getting all frustrated for no reason.
No, Amon, I appreciate that call a lot. Thank you, and thanks for listening to Take a Man with me and Logan as well. I think that there's a political podcast I listened to had a great line years ago as they were talking about a whole bunch of stuff and policies that they thought were bad and whatever. And it's just like, will Congress do this? Which the answer is always no. But the point was there are no bonus points for pessimism. Like, if you are coming at something from an activist, from a fan, something that is emotionally charged, there are no bonus points for pessimism. Now, and I've always loved that phrase because it's so easy to get down. I will also say, as a pragmatist, there's no bonus points for optimism either. That's blowing things out of proportion. There's no like, hey, everything's going to be fine all the time. Like, really the best place to live is reality, which is, okay, let's take the emotions out of it for a second. Let's take a deep breath. Where are we right now? Ben Johnson took himself out. Okay? That one feels like it hurts based off what we thought of what he is. Macdonald goes to Seattle. That one hurts because he seems to be really, really sharp. Everyone else is still on the table except for Raheem Morris, who we've known has been out for a week. And we've said all along that, at least on this show, I've said, I won't take, Anthony, I won't rope you into this, but I think you agree with me on this. We said this is an extremely strong field of candidates. Well, the cool thing about a strong field is if you get the quote-unquote last pick, you're still picking from someone awesome. So, and what they do, here's the other thing, like someone like Kellen Moore, who was supposed to be, like Kellen Moore didn't even make it to be the head coach, right? He was the hotshot candidate in Dallas a couple years ago. He lasted 1 year with Justin Herbert in LA, and then now he's going to go to Philly. And by the way, I don't love that fit in Philly. Now, I might look like a total boob a year from now if it works out. Wouldn't be the first time. Won't be the last. I've also gotten a lot of stuff right over the years. That's the nature of talking into microphones for 3 hours a day and a couple extra podcasts and yada, yada. Right? But Kellen Moore, if he goes and tries to run a pass-happy offense with Jalen Hurts, I don't think it's going to go great. It's about fit. So if Dan Quinn winds up being the guy, it'd be cool if Dan Campbell came here. I would love that. Dan Quinn comes here, and he finds his muse in the number 2 pick, and he finds a great OC who hires a great QB coach and a great tight end coach, and they have a good staff, and they have some sustainability over time. They'll be here a long time. And maybe eventually it runs its course in the same way that it did with Pete Carroll in Seattle. But if it runs its course with a couple of Super Bowl appearances, then sweet. And we talk about some of the retreads, quote unquote, that have worked. And I had someone point out this to me on YouTube today and talk about some more of the YouTube thoughts and never read the comments coming up at 5:30. But, Pete Carroll at work because he found Russell Wilson. Bill Belichick worked because he found Tom Brady. You tell me the great coach in NFL history that doesn't have a great quarterback that has sustained it over time. Right now, it feels like that's Kyle Shanahan if he can go win a Super Bowl next Sunday, and he's doing it with Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant. But in hindsight, we don't look at what the Rams did or the Cardinals did with Kurt Warner as they did it with an undrafted guy. No, we look at it as Kurt Warner, the Hall of Famer. Sometimes guys late work out. So if Brock Purdy's the guy, like maybe we look back and it's like, damn, Kyle gets credit for finding a Hall of Famer in the last pick of the draft with John Lynch and Adam Peters. Of course you need great players. No coach is succeeding with not great players. My question is, what do you get out of those players? And how long can you get it out of them? And how well does your GM manage the roster to continue to give you great players? Those are the questions that will determine success. And I think Dan Quinn and Anthony Weaver seem like guys, and there are others as well. And by the way, even though he's not my cup of tea for this job, Eric Bieniemy has gotten greatness out of some of the best players in the history of the sport. He's helped Patrick Mahomes be Patrick Mahomes. He helped Adrian Peterson be Adrian Peterson. Maybe that winds up being the guy, and whoever they drafted to has that strain of greatness in them that they can take the coaching from someone like Bieniemy and make it work. Who knows? We don't yet. And beating yourself up and calling everything a disastrous failure and just thinking it's all going to go to you-know-what before any of it even begins is, to me, a waste of negative energy. Don't need that in your life. Put a smile on your face. Be optimistic. Let's keep it rolling with Sanford. Sanford, thanks for calling on that Ace Law listener line. You're up with your thoughts on where the Commanders should go from here.
Hi, Craig. Thanks for taking my call.
You got it.
Hey, my point is we're down to three finalists that you mentioned. I like Anthony Weaver. I think he would be a good choice. My frustration is make a decision. You're down to the final three. Make a decision. I mean, what are you doing? That's my point. Is just make a decision and move on.
Well, the thing is, we don't know if they have, and like contract negotiations can be tricky as well. So they might be working through some details there. Like we don't know at this time whether they made a decision or not.
The reason why I said I watched Adam Schefter a few minutes ago, and he was talking, saying that it seemed like he was talking for the Commanders, saying stuff like, "Well, there's no rush. We have time. We nobody else. We're not competing with anybody else now. So why should we rush?" I hope that's not their philosophy right now. The way he put that, because that's to me is not. It's very frustrating. I mean, make a decision, move on.
Well, I do think there's a reason to not be too nonchalant with it, but I'm curious why you think. Like, why are you so concerned about the timing now that you're not competing with anyone else for a head coach? Because Adam's correct.
I think because the assistants, because you have to hire other assistants. A lot of them are drying up, are being hired. Excuse me. So as long as you do this, you won't get a choice of to me, a decent offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, so forth.
Right.
I at least want to be able to get a good candidate for that.
No, I hear you on that, and that is the correct answer. I think as long as people are not hurrying for the sake of hurrying, and they understand that there is work to be done. And Sanford, I appreciate the call. Thank you. Then I get it. I will also say this though, to perhaps quell some of that potential anxiety. These candidates went in to the process saying, this is who I want as my OC, right? For instance, for Weaver and Quinn and Aaron Glenn, like these guys have mentally put together a staff. Now, is that 100% sure that it's done? Not necessarily. And especially if it's like, what if Anthony Weaver was really impressed with I know they beat the brakes off him, but what if he watched Miami and was just like, you know who I want? I want Frank Smith. I want the OC in Miami, someone that I'm stunned did not get more head coaching looks and is probably going to stay in Miami as the OC. But what if he's like, hey, Frank, you want to come up here and call plays? Dan Quinn could certainly make that call, right? Frank Smith is off of this tree, and they might have actually worked together in Atlanta. I think that was Chicago. Frank Smith was Logan's tight ends coach at one point. Dan Quinn was his head coach at one point. They're all a part of the Shanahan tree, or have relations in that Shanahan tree. So maybe Frank Smith winds up being the OC here because Dan could give him play calling duties, and he's not going to get that in Miami because Mike calls the plays. Maybe that's up the sleeve. Point would be that a lot of these things might be not done because they take time to get the contract details figured out and all that kind of stuff. But the conversations have happened and they're ongoing. It's like, hey, if I get this job, I want you to come be my OC. And typically, if you're having that conversation, that you're giving that person a raise that they're not going to turn down and a promotion they're not going to turn down. So yes, could they also get the same call from someone else and you lose out? Yeah, there is a competitive marketplace. I'm not dismissing that as a zero, but I don't think it's quite as intense, perhaps, as people want. Anthony, 1, 2, or 3?
3.
Okay. Let's go to Reggie. Reggie, thanks for calling. You're on the Hoffman Show.
Hey, gentlemen. My question is, what the world is going on with Eric Bieniemy? I mean, is that the holdup that they had to bring him on? If that's the case, why don't they just go ahead and let him go and find his own way?
Because, the situation with Eric Bieniemy is pretty simple. Like, if the new head coach wants to keep Eric Bieniemy as the offensive coordinator, then they don't have to adjust his contract. And if he doesn't, then they'll let him go. And I would imagine along this process, perhaps, that if other teams were interested in Eric and reached out, they might have let him go interview. But it doesn't seem to be a big Eric Bieniemy market, which I think is interesting. I also don't think it's impossible that Quinn or Weaver or Glenn would not keep Eric here. Again, I'm not that interested in that. And I would assume that Josh Harris and Adam Peters and, there would be discussions about that involve the front office and involve what intel do you have on what happened last year, perhaps some conversations with players. You don't want players deciding a coach, but you want to understand what happened and what went wrong here. I think that at the end of the day, Eric is stuck in a contract situation. Maybe they're really psyched about him as a potential head coach candidate. Maybe, I don't know. But it certainly seems like it's just a matter of let's keep him around because we have him under contract and he could be helpful, but I have a hard time seeing him being here long term. But that's the decision of the head coach. And that's what Adam Peters has said from go, is the coach is going to hire his staff. We will support him in that. And so we're not going to take any options off the table because it becomes much harder to rehire someone than to just keep them under contract with the way that contracts work, because that's the legalities and the contractualness of it all. All right. That is a great hour of calls. We'll get back to some more coming up later on.
This is the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app.